Hello and welcome. I'm Ijoma Onyato. Tonight, clash between police and members of the Islamic movement in Nigeria in Abuja leaves unconfirmed number of persons killed. President Buhari directs IGP to avert breakdown of law and order. President Buhari sets target of 11,000 megawatts of power by 2023 as the federal government signs power roadmap agreement with German company Siemens. Supreme Court strikes out application by the All Progressives Congress, asking it to renew the consequential orders of its earlier judgment on the Zamfara governorship elections. And at least 17 people killed and 30 others injured following a bomb blast outside a hotel near the international airport in Somali capital, Mogadishu.
On business news tonight, Bank of Industry's assets base exceeds 1 trillion naira for the first time in the lender's history.
On sports news tonight, Aqua Starlets, Jigawa Golden Stars, Adamawa United and Warri Wolves gain promotion to the Nigeria Professional Football League.
The Shiite protesters again hit the streets of the nation's capital, Abuja, today, demanding the release of their leader, Sheikh Ibrahim El-Zakzaky. But the protests turned violent after a clash with the police, who tried to disperse them as they made their way to the federal secretariat. The death toll from the protests is still uncertain. A reporter with Channels Television was also hit by a stray bullet. Our correspondent, Kayla Megwa, reports.
The protesters assembled at the Adetokunbo Ademola Crescent in Wuse-2, Abuja. Men and women in their hundreds gathering as they have for the past 3 years, demanding the release of their leader, Ibrahim El-Zakzaky, and his wife, Zina Ibrahim.
We are all Zakzaky! We are all Zakzaky! We are all Zakzaky! We are all Zakzaky! Free our leader! Free our leader!
As they approached the federal secretariat in the central business district, the police shoot tear gas at the protesters to disperse them. Chaos ensues as the protesters retaliate, and the situation deteriorates into a full-on battle. The National Emergency Management Agency truck is burnt down, and we saw 2 bodies on the floor beside the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, one belonging to a police officer and the other belonging to a Shiite protester. The chaos left motorists and pedestrians scampering to safety in an unfortunate incident which lasted for hours. A member of staff of Channels Television was also shot in the crossfire. In a statement from the force public relations officer, residents of the Federal Capital Territory are advised to remain calm and avoid affected areas, as further developments will be communicated to the public.
The protest started early this morning. The Free Zakzaky protesters have been protesting in the nation's capital for quite a while, and today's protest turned surprisingly violent. Started pretty easy. However, it suddenly turned very violent, and you can hear the gunshots and the explosions behind me. The protesters and the police have been having gunfire exchange between each other for quite a while now. People are really scared, trying to find how they can get out of this place. Remember, this is the federal secretariat in the nation's capital, and this gunfire exchange is going on now. The Shiites have run all the way in there, and the police have followed after them. So there have been records, people saying that there have been casualties here and there, but no actual figure has been given yet. But this is the situation right now in front of the federal secretariat in the nation's capital. Kayla Megwa, Channels Television News.
And it's with great sadness that the management and staff of Channels Television announced the untimely, unfortunate death of Precious Owolabi, a youth corps member who, until his death, was serving at our Abuja station. He was 23 years old. Precious was shot while covering the clash between the police and the Shiite protesters earlier today in Abuja. We regret the death of such a young and promising journalist, and we pray that God will grant his family the fortitude to bear the irreparable loss and grant his soul eternal rest. Well, the police authorities have confirmed that the Deputy Commissioner of Police was shot dead during the Shiites' protest in Abuja today. The slain officer, identified as Usman Umar, was the Deputy Commissioner of Police in charge of operations at the FCT, while 2 other Assistant Superintendents of Police also sustained serious injuries and are currently receiving treatment in hospital. A statement from the police spokesperson, Frank Mba, says the armed protesters defied all sense of decency and violently attacked innocent citizens and the police officers on duty. The statement adds that the police have arrested 54 suspects in connection with the incident, and they will be arraigned in court as soon as possible. And shortly after the deadly protest, the Inspector General of Police, Mohammed Adamu, was summoned to the State House by the President for an explanation on the matter. After the meeting, the police chief told State House correspondents that the President has asked him to provide security for all Nigerians and not to give any opportunity for a group of people to cause the breakdown of law and order. Before today's unrest, police authorities had restricted all protests to the Unity Fountain in the city centre to protect lives and property of innocent Nigerians.
Well, specifically, we briefed him on the incessant coming out of this group of people protesting here and there, and we briefed him on the fact that we've been able to curtail their excesses, and to let him understand that everything's under control. The President asked us to make sure we provide security for every citizen of this country, and not to leave any space that will some group of people will create a breakdown of law and order. So the charge by Mr. President is that we must provide security for every Nigerian.
And staying with the Shiites protest, the National Youth Council of Nigeria, which is the apex youth body in the country, has condemned the approach used by the Shiites to demand for the release of their leader, Sheikh Ibrahim El-Zakzaki. The youth body states that 90% of the protesters are mostly youths who are supposed to be engaged productively in their respective fields. They say raising arms against security personnel and fighting the government is never a way out. The president of the council, Ambassador Oladele John Nihi, says the youths cannot just raise arms against the government and expect the government to do their bidding. He is, however, asking the government to look into the matter before it gets out of control. Now let's get a bit more perspective about this issue. I'm now being joined live from Abuja by a human rights lawyer, Mr. Clement Nwankwo. Thanks a lot for joining us on the News at 10 on this pretty sad day, especially for us here at Channels Television. Well, let me start by just asking you your reaction to this escalation of the issue. From what we saw today in Abuja, people being shot, people being killed. How does it strike you now?
Very sad. First of all, to commiserate with Channels and the members of family of the journalist who died, and as well the police officer who was killed, and several others who may have been killed in the incident as well, because from the videos there appeared to be several deaths. I think it's really very sad that this matter has gotten to the point that it has. When they started, everyone thought that the matter would go through the courts and would be resolved, and if courts have made orders that people who have been charged in the courts and have been granted bail would be released. There is due process. On all sides, of course, there are concerns about where this is. But this for the country is very, very sad, because the images going out of this country, especially seeing protests in the Federal Capital Territory of Nigeria, all portrays significant instability in the country. And it portrays the government as being incapable of managing the security situation in this country. We know that the Shiites have a major concern, have a major grouse, and we urge restraint on all sides so that these deaths will not continue to recur. But we also believe that the federal government has pending court orders to obey, has people to release from custody on the basis of court orders that have been made. El-Zakzaki has been in government custody. He has suffered a lot. He's probably under very severe pains as a result of the injuries that he received. And the courts have made orders asking that he be released. Several of these matters have been in court. Lawyers have spoken up against it. And people have been held in custody in violation of court process in violation of the constitution of our land. And it shouldn't happen. Yet, it doesn't justify the violence in terms of making demands on the part of the Shiites. I think the solution at this time is for government to obey the court order that has been issued for several years now, not just with El-Zakzaky, Dasuki, who has been in prison as well, and several others who have been held against court orders for their release. This is completely unacceptable. When a democracy, if court orders are made, government has a responsibility to obey court orders. That's what our constitution says. And it is really sad that government, by disobeying court orders, is allowing for this instability to begin.
All right, Mr. Wankwo, I know you've talked about the infraction of the law and how the government should obey court orders, etc. But bringing it back to what we saw this morning in Abuja, just to ask you what you think the government's response should be. Yes, they have been responding, but how do we now prevent a further escalation of hostilities concerning this particular matter?
The immediate thing to do for government is not to absolve itself of responsibility for continuing to detain El-Zakzaky. He should be released. There have been several court orders, not one, not two, that have been made. Government should release them. The followers of El-Zakzaky, the Shiites, of course, need to know that they can protest, that this must be within the law, which calls for peaceful protest. And all of the protests that have been going on by the Shiites sometimes have infringed on the rights of other citizens as well. But the immediate cause or the immediate responsibility for this, of course, is the failure of government to obey the court order to release El-Zakzaky and his wife, who are sick in prison, who are injured, and reportedly even blinded, either on one eye or two eyes. And I think the government must respect the constitution of this country and release people who have been ordered to be released by court order, not just El-Zakzaky, but several others who have been held in violation of court orders.
Yes, but even speaking about these particular court orders, some have said that the judiciary are playing their own role in it. I mean, looking at the court in Abuja granting him bail, and the court in Kaduna denying him bail. They're going back again, I think, on the 29th or so to look at that fresh appeal for bail. Do you see any role for the courts in this thing in terms of also adding to the confusion?
Well, the courts have made orders releasing them. The arraignment in Kaduna was even after a court order for their bail and release had been granted. So simply reproducing fresh charges and arraigning people to the courts when an order has been made for release cannot really be put in the purview of the courts. The courts, of course, when you bring a charge, have a responsibility to look at those charges and go forward with it. But court orders have been made. They were made in Abuja before the case of murder was filed in Kaduna. And I think when you look at it, you even ask yourself whether there is an abuse of court process by the government in charging them on multiple charges. Court orders have been made. We are in a democracy, and it is really sad to see government continuing to operate as if this is a military regime, as if we are in a dictatorship, and courts are just there to be pawns in the hands of manipulation of the system. The immediate solution to this is to release El-Zakzaky and his wife and free them, or release them on bail as the courts have provided, or ensure that they go on bail and take adequate medical care. I shudder to think what would happen if what we're seeing today is going on. I shudder to think what would happen were they to in any way suffer any adverse consequences as a result of their detention by government.
All right, human rights lawyer, Mr. Clement Wankwo, thanks for sharing your thoughts with us on the News at 10 tonight.
Thank you.
Right, we move on to other stories now. At least 15 persons are feared killed by gunmen during an attack in Zango village of Kankara local government area of Katsina state. A resident of the local government council confirmed the incident to Channels Television, adding that several women are also kidnapped in the attack that took place in the early hours of last night. The residents say the gunmen also set the house and car of the village head ablaze. The state police command is yet to confirm the attack. In part two, after the break, Hope Democratic Party closes case against the election of President Buhari at the Presidential Election Petitions Tribunal after calling its first witness. That's in a moment. Please stay with us.